Good morning, and thanks for joining us here on Treasure Coast Solutions, Community Solutions today, talking about some of the things that are happening in our community, some of the good things that take place, some of the things that are out there going on that you might want to be aware of if you're looking for something to get involved in or just something to support or participate in. We have a number of different things going on, and that's the purpose of this show. My name is Mark Breckville. I'm a local CPA. And am involved in a number of nonprofits and a number of activities, including the United Way. So many of you know that are regular listeners. This show is brought to us by the United Way and Mark Breckville PLLC, as well as Martin Volunteers. We're trying to get the word out about some of the things that are happening in the community and some of the things that are taking place. So it is a community service program, just to let you know. I know many of you have been around for a while and realize that there are a lot of things out there, but may not realize how many things are really taking place behind the scenes, things that you don't maybe necessarily know about or hear about, or maybe it's things that you don't have a specific situation that it applies to you, but it's still nice to know that the resource is out there in case you get a question or you have somebody that tells you, hey, I got this problem or I got this situation. Do you know anybody that can help you? So that's what we're talking about. That's the kind of thing that we're going to discuss this morning. It is available for you to call 220-9788, 220-WSTU, and we'd be happy to get you on the air if you got a question about for one of our for our program here today. Today, I'm gonna have I've got an opportunity here to talk about a program that we talked about a couple months ago, and I think it was a couple months ago, right, that we were doing this, and it's a program that Tykes and Teens is putting together and has put together. It's called Mapping the Middle, and as many of you know, Tykes and Teens deals with what we call tweens, which are not really the tykes and not fully the teens. And so it's kind of as those have had kids gone through that recently, they know that is probably the most difficult age of any of the ages in terms of dealing with that group. And so it's a challenge. I think for me, I think that what amazes me about that age group is that they're dealing with all the social problems that we used to deal with in high school, and yet they're in middle school. And granted, we weren't an adult in high school, but we were further along in our development in high school and able to handle certain of these social issues. Now you're asking a 12-year-old or an 11-year-old to deal with some of these issues as they're leaving elementary school and getting into middle school. So it is just an amazing. I just don't understand it, and that's why we have people here to talk to us about it. So Jeff Shears, he's the. What are you, just like the king? Is that is there a name for you? Ruler,
CEO, technically.
Oh,
yes.
CEO,
fearless leader. That's what we call
fearless
him.
leader. That's true. So yes, you are. You've been out there a long time leading. I got to give you credit for that.
Thank
you
you.
are a good leader. So you can have the name King. King Shear. We'll let that go for you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about. Or maybe just give us a little bit of introduction and tell us a little bit about the program, and maybe we can talk about it a little further.
Well, Mapping the Middle, as you mentioned, is probably it was a program that we designed specifically for dealing with middle school students. And as you mentioned, it is the most difficult time period to raise a child. So, physiologically, socially, they still have a lot of the skills that they have in elementary school. But as you mentioned, they have the pressures of a high school student. And that does not always bode very well. From a brain development point of view, there's a tremendous amount of pruning that occurs in the brain, meaning some of the skills that they had before, they begin to lose. And the function of that is so that they can begin to specialize. But part of that problem, though, is they forget some of those things. They don't have the what we call executive functioning, the problem-solving skills that they will have later in high school. And that becomes very hard. very
Yeah.
hard.
It's interesting that we're dealing with, and we had a couple incidents um, here locally with an issue relative to security, and I know this is controversial, and some people out there are going to get upset with me. So this isn't necessarily you guys, but I kind of want to get your view on this thing. And Aneska's here too. She's for those that our show has been upgraded. If you want to go live on it's a lot better. Normally, you don't want to see in the studio, but today that's okay. You can do that. But we had a. We talk about middle school kids, and for me, I went to a grade school, so I was all the way through 8th grade. We mixed, with the young ones, and our brothers and sisters were at the same school, so we could beat them up in class, things like that. But it was, but I know how hard 6th, 7th, and 8th grade was, and the boys' development's completely different than the girls' development. And, boys are still big kids. I mean, I'm an adult. I'm 63. I'm still a big kid, but most people will tell you that. But I mean, even more so, they're still playing, we're still playing Army and, all of those kind of games that we were playing or whatever they're playing now. And yet you're expected to interact socially with girls and all of this kind of stuff. But there's just all that confusion and the kids handle it differently, and all of that. And we've got all this issue, and I understand the importance of the security in the schools, but we had a situation here recently where I think a 12 or 13-year-old boy claimed he was going to bring it was bring your gun to school day or something. He had a picture of his gun, and he didn't even own one. I mean, it was a toy gun. And in the old days we would know that was, that's just Jimmy. He's a big kidder. But now everything has to be taken seriously. And so now you've got some kid who potentially has had his life damaged because he's got a record at 12 or 13 or something. I mean, how can we deal with that? I mean, I don't understand. We talk about how difficult it is for these kids, but yet we actually expect them to think like adults at 12 and 13 years old. And boys don't ever think like adults. So let alone at 12 or 13. I don't understand. What do we do?
I think you bring up a really good point in that, we've talked often in our office about the whole school shooter kind of phenomenon and what are the things that we can do as a mental health provider to prevent those things from happening. And really what we recognize is connections. Most of those kids feel like they're others. They don't feel like they connect to anything. And that really is kind of the cornerstone of this event that we have this weekend. The author that we have coming to speak, she wrote the book called Queen Bees and Wannabes.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the other book is called
Masterminds and Wingmen.
So one is about girls and connections with girls, and the other one is about boys and connections with boys. And they do it very differently. They exclude others very differently. And so having this kind of insight as parents might be something that we can do something about. And we can debate about security and guns and all of those things, but until people feel like they have a sense of purpose, a sense of hope, suicides and mass shootings will continue to exist. And so we are doing everything that we can to make sure that people don't feel like others and can be included. And that really is kind of the purpose of this workshop.
And Ines could jump in here anytime you want, but what I'm getting at though, and I understand that, and I think, at the high school level in particular, you can start identifying those. But I'm not sure that is the issues at the middle school level. I mean, these 11 and 12-year-old, or 12 or 13-year-old boys, 11 really, 11, 12, they just haven't. I mean, I don't know that they're doing it as just, a lot of this stuff is just, that's their way to, socialize, to kid around, they just don't think about it. I mean, I just don't think they have the ability at that level to reason. And in the old days, in the old days, we knew that. The teachers knew that. The parents knew that. We were involved. So, so the teacher would call and say, hey, you need to, Billy's doing this again. He's fooling around. He's a class clown. You need to get him settled down or whatever. He's doing all these jokes. He's going to get in trouble and, all of that kind of stuff. And, but now we lock down. we have to lock down the school, and social media is an issue. Both of these things were social media things. It's just, and unfortunately, that's the way kids communicate nowadays. But once it's out there, and all of a sudden, so I just really struggle with this age group, and boys and girls. I mean, the boys, like I said, it's just they're just not that mature yet. They're just coming off of playing with Legos and dinosaurs and superheroes, to dealing with all of these other things that are going on in school and the social stuff and want to be popular and all of that. And on the other side, the girls, I mean, it's amazing. One little girl I know, I mean, she went from 5th grade to 6th grade, and I thought she got 6 years older. I mean, all of a sudden, she just looks completely different. And it's just amazing. I don't know how you guys deal with that. I mean, it's just such a tough age group.
It is a very tough age group.
But it's always been a tough age group. I remember growing up in middle school. If you asked me, here's $1 million, if you go back to middle school, I'd say no way. That was terrible. But I think each generation, it's just a different flavor of kind of the same thing. And I know what you were saying, that back in the day, if someone said, oh, I could just die, or I'm going to kill you, you kind of just, little Billy, haha. And now it's treated a little bit differently. But coming from a psychological perspective, I'm kind of glad that it's actually treated a little bit more seriously, and that, that there is more attention to it. Sometimes maybe it's a little bit overboard, or maybe more from a fear perspective, that the way that we come at it. But I'm glad that we actually are paying more attention to things like that.
Yeah, I don't have any problem. I mean, that personally, I don't have any problem with paying attention to it. What I have a problem with is as a 12-year-old getting a criminal record for something that was a practical joke.
Yes.
I mean, you just can ruin a kid's life. And I think I mentioned it on one of the other shows, and it's a conversation I had with my kids when they went off to college. Was I said to both my kids when they were going off to college, I said, look, you're going to go off to college, and you're going to be out, and you're going to have opportunities to face adult problems and adult situations. And previous to this, most of your things that you had problems with, I could help you solve. I could take care of. They were not adult issues, but adult problems I can't fix, as easily. And so you've got to be, aware that something you do now can have a lasting impact on you. And I can't fix that. We're having to have that conversation with a 6th grader now. Well, and I don't think they're capable of understanding that yet.
And I think your point is very valid, but actually data tells us that kids actually get arrested at a much lower rate today than they did back in the late 90s and the 2000s, when we really did criminalize traditional adolescent behavior.
Right.
We recognize actually we were making things worse, just as like you were indicating, that they actually get deeper and deeper into the system. They identify as a delinquent, and so they become that. And we don't do that anymore. I mean, it is a much less rate. I think that this happens to be the issue of the day, and so we do have a tendency to really hyper focus when it's the issue of the day.
Right.
I don't know what else to say about that other than it is. I don't know if there's an answer to the solution. We need to recognize it. We need to provide services for those kids. There is a element in our society that is criminalized, and so we need to manage it. Some of those things in that way, and we as the humans just try to figure it out, as we go along. And when it doesn't work, hopefully we let it go. And when it does work, hopefully we do more of it.
Well, and again, my personal opinion, but I think a lot of this is mental health issues. It's not. It's the recognition of even some of the stuff we're talking about there with these young boys. They still have some issues that probably need to be. This isn't. That there are other ways to get attention other than doing things that are going to splash all over the news, and that kind of thing. But and they may have self-esteem issues, and like you say, you may be catching that little boy before they become the high school kid that all of a sudden is ostracized and and feeling out on their own, who is who does become the shooter.
Right. It does
But
take a while
that's-
to get there. There has to be that sense of
Right,
hopelessness.
right.
And like you said, are they the class clown? Are they the,
Mhm.
you know,
Right.
the brain? Are they the jock? Are they, you know, they have these kinds of elements that they go through to be able to figure it out. And sometimes they get in trouble for it.
Right, right.
But it's not until really late high school, early adulthood that that's really sense of hopelessness kicks in, where they would do something catastrophic.
And I think the other unfortunate thing is sometimes the kids that need the most connection and support are the kids that adults perhaps or even kids are just so repelled by because of their behavior. And those are the kids that you really do need to wrap around. I think our school district, though, is doing a great job, though, in encouraging teachers to listen and be on the lookout and connect to their students, you know, because that really is key.
I
You know,
definitely have seen it over the last 5 years. Our school district really has changed in their philosophy of trying to make sure that all kids are connected. You know, they're you know, we still have our struggles, but the amount of input that they request from us, as well as other mental health providers, to help us connect kids who are difficult to connect with, they really have opened their doors and their eyes and hearts to all of that. And that really, I think we're very lucky in this community to have a school district that's allowed that to happen. I don't think that that's the case everywhere else.
Right. And you know, that's a good point. And you know, it amazes me that we really are asking our teachers to become
We are.
the front line of mental illness
Absolutely. Yeah.
prevention
Yes, we are.
and identification, and yet we're not willing to pay them the money that they should be paid to do that. I mean, we want them to be the parent because some of us don't want to be parents, and you know, and they've got our kid longer than we've got our kid most of the time. And we expect all this stuff out of them, but yet we only want to pay them a minimal amount of money. I mean, we should be paying them large amounts of money. These are the kids. These are the people who are going to help identify what, you know, and try to identify all of this stuff. And so it amazes me that that's the other side of it. I mean, I can understand these teachers. They spend hours and hours, you know, and don't get paid. A lot of the stuff they're doing on the side, let alone the fact that they're underpaid to start with. They're working extra hours that they're not getting paid for anyway. And a lot of it is this, and they know those students, you know, they know those students, but, you know, more and more, you know, there's, you know, not the time, and there's more time in meetings and all of those kind of things and less time for interaction. But yeah, but I think our school district in general does a really good job of that.
Absolutely.
But what kind of things do you guys work with? Like, say, what are the kinds of things that you guys are doing to connect with these tweens, and what types of things are you working on now for them?
Well, I am a big proponent of, if I'm telling kids not to engage in risk behaviors, it's important for me to tell them what to do. So in the past, we've done allowed access to better coping type of situation. So we've done mindful yoga classes that are free to the community and specifically to these tweens. We've done coping creatively using art therapy as a coping mechanism. We've partnered with Parks and Rec of Stewart as well as Martin County to bring fun activities to kids, so they do have something to do and do have alternatives. And I think one of the most important things that we are doing, though, is equipping the public and our teachers to be able to be mindful and engage these kids in a different way through our trauma-informed care program, which spans the 4-county region. So any school, organization, or business that would like to become trauma-informed is able to call upon us, and we come in and do a training and coaching so that they are able to understand and be able to deal with circumstances that might be difficult in a more healing way to drive the behavior in a different direction.
Now, when you say trauma informed, you're talking about all kinds of, like, death in the family or shootings or drugs problems, or is that what it?
Yes.
Is that what you're talking about?
So was a famous study that was done in the late 90s called Adverse Childhood Experience Study. And basically what they identified is there were 10 adverse experiences that directly affect your neurodevelopment. And one of the things that we really talk about in our trauma-informed care program is understanding the meaning of the behavior. What's the function? Why is it the kid doing, or adult for that matter, doing the behavior that they're doing? And oftentimes it is related to, so when you look at the 10 adverse experiences, most of them are related to relationships. So you have your traditional abuses, physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, and then you also have household dysfunctions of mental illness, domestic violence, substance abuse. All of those affect the way that we relate. And one of the functions related to trauma is that we avoid. So we avoid relating to other people, or we relate to other people in not so healthy manners. And so by having adults understand that some of the meaning of those behaviors are different than what we think that they are, we can manage it differently. And I'll give you a quick example. I had a young man I was working with who came to me because he had stolen a cell phone. And he had been adopted by this family when he was a young boy, about 4. And pretty much from the time he was in his household, he stole. It was a frequent thing. And really, the parents identified him as a thief. And this leaked into his, it happened at school and at elementary school. Now he's in middle school. It happens in middle school. Well, what I really, and I've worked with several kids who have been adopted at an older age. And often I understand that there actually is typically a different meaning behind that. And what I discovered is that really the function of his behavior was he would steal things in order to buy food.
Really?
And what his confusion was, and it was very interesting because when he had the sensation of feeling hungry, for him, the urge was to steal. But he didn't know that because his survival instincts from being a very young man is that when he felt hungry, he needed to go and find some food. There were no resources in his household at that time. And so once I got him to connect those two things together, the stealing behavior went away.
And you just
in a very short period of time. So this is a kid who did it for 8 years.
Right.
And within a month, I eliminated that behavior because I actually understood what the meaning of that was. And that really is a very trauma informed. If you understand what the trauma history, you look at the behavior, is there a connection between the two? Can we define that in a more meaningful way so that he can get the support that he needs, which is what we were able to do.
So you just sent him to Publix bakery. But
well, yeah, I mean, well, it's interesting because there were other meanings behind it.
But nobody would have thought of that, right?
No, because it's a delinquent behavior. He's a thief. That's exactly how he was presented to me. And that was not the meaning of the behavior.
And of course, at 4, he didn't realize that wasn't necessary any longer. It was just something that he, and I'm sure
encoded on an unconscious level.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. It's interesting. You talk about those 10, and we didn't get into all of them, but I remember at one point there was an article I read talking about life stress factors, the things that can cause you the most stress in your life, and that basically being aware that if you have more than one of these a year, it's a traumatic. It causes a lot of stress. It's a traumatic situation that you have to deal with, and it was things. It was all adult stuff, but it was things like loss of a child, loss of a parent, or spouse, changing jobs. Yeah, right. All that.
I've seen that. Yet.
Yeah, right. So we think of that on the adult level. Now think about that for a middle school student. Mm-hmm. They are going. Relationship breakups, divorce, things like that. So think about that now for a middle school student. They go through changing their environment. They went from elementary school to middle school, completely different environment, different school system. They go to different relationships. Those relationships are quick and they break up quick. So they go through both developing and breaking it up. They may have other things going on in their own life, but just at their home, but at the same, and you know what, at that age, a lot of people, still are end up of a situation that they're losing a family member. Mm-hmm. They're experiencing death for the first time, sometimes pets, sometimes whatever, but they're starting to deal with, those kind of situations. And all of those are traumatic. And all of those things that if they were an adult, we would say, if you got 2 of those, you should get some counseling. We throw them into middle school, and they got 6 of them, or something like that.
And remember, they don't have the executive functioning skills.
Right.
The brain development is not there. So that we have as an adult.
Right.
That we say, go get help.
Yeah, right.
That they don't even have those skills.
Right.
Yet.
But I also do want to add that coming from a trauma-informed care perspective, I think some people are misjudging it as, but we're coddling these kids. And we're saying, poor Jimmy, because he's been through X, Y, and Z. But it's really not about that. It's just about understanding behavior in a different way. And Jeff still held his client accountable for his behaviors and how that worked out. And of course, he was able to shift. So it's really not about poor so-and-so, but it's more about let's understand the behavior. Let's understand yourself so that you can shift that behavior versus, being punitive and, giving punishment each time a person, or in this case, that child would have stolen, because imagine that would have not gone anywhere because
Well,
the need was so deep and visceral.
He had been arrested. He had gotten suspended from school. He had gotten grounded at home. They had done all the discipline things,
Right.
and yet the behavior continued to exist because we weren't addressing what the meaning of that behavior was. And that really is what that accountability is that we as a system needs to be accountable, because if we actually understood what that was, we as a system can be accountable to help him understand those behaviors. And that really is what a trauma-informed environment is about.
And you're right, and you guys as trained professionals, you know how to handle these. The thing that I get concerned about is that more and more we're shoving this off onto people who are not trained professionals, and we don't either. We think we can't afford, or we don't spend the time to train them to become professionals in this area. And I know you guys make hundreds of thousands of dollars, so that you're having a hard time relating to this, right?
Our therapists make less than teachers.
That's right. That's right.
Just saying.
I know.
Just putting that out there.
That's right. Just putting that out there. So, but I think that a lot of times we, I think still there's a lot of issues with the parents just not getting involved. I mean, really, the first line of defense are the parents recognizing that there's an issue. And that they may need help in dealing with it. Sometimes, the parents today, they may be stressed out themselves. They got things going on in their own life. There's a lot of single parents. There's a lot of divorce. There's a lot of things going on, and
Drug
so
abuse, alcoholism.
it's you name it, and they're, I hate to say it, but sometimes so focused on what's happening with them that they're not really catching that, hey, my kid needs. And the kids experiencing the same stuff. They just don't see that it's affecting them as much. And I know in some of the places that we have issues, the issues are really, they're not education, they're lack of parental involvement. And I understand it's a tough world in that, but it's just very difficult when there's no guidance like that.
Absolutely.
And I know that some of the schools are doing a pretty good job of, trying to get, just getting the parents involved and all of that kind of thing. But it's just, it's such a difficult thing. You watch what's taking place, and I just appreciate so much what you guys are doing. That's what I guess the purpose of this is, that it's very hard. I went through some of the stuff at the beginning so people could really understand how hard this is, and there aren't a lot of right answers. I mean, you as professionals are still dealing with
trying to figure it out.
Trying to figure it out.
Yes.
And Ineska, you were saying about the issue with, you're not coddling, but recognition. Sometimes all the child needs is some intervention and recognition, that they're not by themselves. They're not alone in the world, that somebody does watch over them, care about them, and knows, and can watch out for them. And I think that, I think it's an important factor.
Right.
Well, it's interesting, sociologically, we went from, there's what we call free range parents, and these days they're bad, but, basically, back in the 80s and so on, and that we allowed our kids to go and be in the environment and without very little supervision. Now, you are a bad parent if you do not have your child supervised every minute of the day. You have play dates. You don't go to the neighbor's house to go play. Right. We arrange these things from a kid that's across town as opposed to a kid who's across the street. And that, to me, when we talk about coddling, we have parents, we've shifted the term from the helicopter parent to the lawnmower parent, who basically clear away all the obstacles so that they can have that clear.
Cool. I didn't hear that term.
Yeah.
That's a good
It's a new one.
It's a new one. But it's true that we do know that adversity actually helps us grow. So again, it's not that we don't want to hold kids accountable. It's not that we don't, utilize discipline when it's needed, but when it's not working, we have to look beyond that. And how do we help kids learn from the negative experiences they have, as opposed to always preventing them from happening? There's a nuance between all of that, and we have temperament. What I heard, you had multiple kids. I'm sure the way you raised one child is very different than you raised the other. I have two kids as well. Very different personalities.
Yeah, the second one you don't care about. They're on their own. Hey,
and how you navigate
the other
those
one made
things
it. I showed I could do it. You're on your own.
I proved myself already.
That's right. But no, you're right, and that's, I guess what I'm getting at is that the place we used to make the mistakes were middle school and elementary school, and high school to some degree. Each time we were able to make those mistakes. But in the parents' defense, I think to some degree, they're afraid
Mhm.
to allow their kids to make those mistakes because those mistakes are so critical now.
Yes.
Mhm.
And and you don't know. I mean, you now talk about, and I don't think there's more of it, but it's out in the open more. But sexual abuse. So you're sending somebody over to a friend's house from school. You don't know anything about those.
Right.
So and with what we get from society, they're probably pedophiles.
Yeah.
So I don't care. I know them, but they're pedophiles.
So just
And-
9 out of 10 kids who are molested by people they know.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
That's absolutely. I mean,
So
that's why a lot of the rape is date rape. I
Mhm.
mean, it's the same
Right,
concept.
absolutely.
So so you got, as a parent, you understand that. You're saying that it's not a nice world. That's not an experience I want them to have.
Yes.
Mhm.
Very true.
Mhm.
But it's so difficult, and it's becoming more and more difficult because we're not allowing those kids to make mistakes that they have to deal with, that aren't permanent mistakes that now
Mhm.
they have to deal with,
Right.
and so and I'm a big believer of that. I was a fan of sports, not necessarily because of being a big jock type thing, but because of some of the things that it teaches you that you
Mhm.
can lose,
Absolutely.
that you will come back potentially, but you have to come back. And the ability to experience in sports, there's always somebody that's better
Mhm.
at it than you. There's always going to be somebody else out there. So it was good to learn to fail because it made success that much more worthwhile, because you knew what you had to work for.
Mhm.
Yes.
Um,
Completely agree.
Mhm.
and so, but we're starting to take away some of that. And as parents, I think we kind of wanted to take some of that away. It's kind of funny that
It's hard to watch our kids hurt,
Mhm.
yes, it is.
but
And-
sometimes we need that in order to grow.
Mhm.
Right, right. Yeah, it is. It is very difficult. And but it's funny that I think what goes around comes around. Some of the parents now are dealing with some of the
Right. The 35-year-old that's home.
That's right.
Yes.
They're
Yep.
dealing with all of that. So, but anyway, I think let's talk a little bit about the program that you guys have got coming up, and this the author that we're talking about, and maybe give us a little bit of an idea and cover again where this is going to be located at.
Sure. Well, we're going to be at Indian River State College on Salerno Road. And this is actually probably the biggest person we have ever had
Yes.
for Mapping the Middle. She is rather famous, if you will. And she is a New York Times bestselling author. And again, Jeff had mentioned the 2 books that she had written, but she's also written a slew of other books as well. If you remember the movie Mean Girls, have you ever seen Mean Girls, Mark?
Yes, I did.
You did?
I did
Oh,
see
I'm
that,
so
yes.
proud of
I
you.
did. I saw that.
That's
yes.
wonderful. Well, her book, or the movie, was basically based on her book.
Okay.
Tina Fey had consulted her to develop the movie.
Oh.
Now, again, the movie is a comedy, so a lot of stuff
Yeah.
is
Yes.
a little stretched. But again, it really is about the social nuances amongst girls and the social nuances amongst boys. The first event is from 6 to 7:30 on Friday, the 26th. And that is geared towards parents as well as the teenagers. And she will just kind of be able to talk a little bit about those social nuances, how to survive those, and what parents can do to support that survival. The second day will be on Saturday from 9:30 to 11 a.m. And that's more for educators, workers, and or parents. And that's to kind of teach them a little bit about those social nuances and how they can support as well. But it's not... again, it's more adult geared. But we're super excited, and we couldn't have done it with some of our amazing sponsors, which is the Martin County Commissioners, United Way Character Counts, our Children's Services Council of Martin County, CORE, Best Western has helped out. Barnes & Noble is a supporter of us, which we're very grateful for. I love Barnes & Noble. Martin Health System, and please tell me if I'm missing anybody else.
Did you say Children's Services?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I think we got them all. They're
And
all
it is
great.
free to the public.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
it is this is why we do what we do, is to educate people on some of these nuances so that we can be more effective at dealing with our tweens. And
Mhm.
as we've been discussing, it's a very hard age group, and
Mhm.
I think it's going to she will facilitate some really great discussions.
Mhm.
And I assume you got this information's gone out to schools and the teachers, and they've
sir.
got everything,
Mhm.
so they're ready to go.
Yep.
And it's we do have we do a lot of, I know a lot of the teachers have continuing education courses and they don't get to go to as many of them anymore because the travel costs are so high
Mhm.
that the school districts rein some of that in. So this is a good one because it's local.
Mhm.
So if you're looking to get some
And after hours.
and
Yep.
after hours, so you can do it another thing for free. So that's a good thing. But Friday, October 26th, from 6 to 7:30, that's Queen Bees and Masterminds, and then Saturday from 9:30 to 11 on the 27th is Creating a Culture of Dignity. This is going to be, I think this is going to be a really great program. And I know it'll help out a lot because a lot of parents are looking for, how,
Mhm.
they're going through the same thing.
Yes.
Mhm.
As their child is going to middle school, they're experiencing middle school again. And many of them, it's dredging up their own
Yeah,
issues
sure.
with middle school, right? And so they're trying to think, oh man, and that makes them afraid. So part of it is just is getting them to understand what's happening. So that's kind of it's really kind of cool. I like this, and I think it's a great program you guys are bringing in. I think this. You guys are focusing, and you're one of the few organizations really that is focused on that particular age group. It's something that you guys have always been working with, but I know it is an age group that has fallen in the gap.
Mhm.
It's fallen
And
between.
it's such a pivotal age.
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and so it's kind of interesting the things that are going on. I guess one of the things that I kind of wanted to go over a little bit is, we kind of jumped right into this program a little bit and a little bit of the issues that you guys are dealing with, but maybe you can back up a little bit and give us some background on Tykes and Teens and what types of things you handle, how you get your referrals, how you get your funding, just a few things like that. So if people want to help out, they know how to do that.
Well, sure. Well, I'll plug our big fundraiser that's coming up. We
Okay.
have our annual Festival of Trees, which is down at the Flagler Place
Yes.
here in downtown Stewart, which is right after Thanksgiving. The week after Thanksgiving is when that event. It's an all-week event. That's our biggest fundraiser that we do for the year. But as far as services go,
And by the way, there's Breakfast with Santa that I'm sponsoring.
yes,
So.
Oh.
on Saturday morning. That's
On
right.
Saturday
I
morning.
think that's
Love that
December
thing.
3rd, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. It's cool.
But we've been providing services for 22 years. Our cornerstone is we provide mental health services to children, and we pretty much serve children birth up to age 21 as long as they're still in school. And of course, the very young children, we actually work in concert with their parents. It's what we call dyadic treatment. So we work with the small child as well as their parent to help understand those cues and enhance the attachment. Most of it is trauma-based, working with children that were involved with Department of Children and Families. We have our YES program, Youth Enrichment Services program, which deals with high-risk teens. So those are kids who struggling with suicidality, frequent psychiatric hospitalizations, maybe involvement with juvenile justice, some drug issues. So kind of, again, those are all of our high-risk kids. We actually do a program called dialectical behavior therapy. And basically that is a treatment that helps kids who really are struggling with managing their emotions very effectively. It impacts their education, their relationships, their decision making. It's a 6-month-long program. Been quite successful. We had a donor about a year and a half ago help us gear up to be able to fully implement that program. We're serving almost 50 kids in that portion, the dialectical behavior therapy itself.
Now, how are kids identified for that program?
So some we've actually done some publicity. So we if they're involved with if they're coming out of the hospital. So at New Horizons, for instance, they could refer directly to the program because of course they would meet criteria. But most of them come from they're already in our general mental health program. They recognize that the child's struggling with their emotional regulation, and so they then refer them over to the group component. And then the team works together to support them because there's there's a family component, parent component to that program as well.
Okay.
We have our alternative out of school suspension program. So that's a program for middle and high school students who get suspended from school. They come to our program during the duration of their suspension. We collaborate with the city of Stewart. We just expanded up into Indian River County. So we're providing that up in Indian River in Vero Beach. We're collaborating with Gifford Youth Achievement Center up there. This is our first year there. We've been doing it 19 years here in Martin. And we have our prevention services, of course, the NESHKAS program.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, don't forget suspension prevention
Oh,
on
right.
the other end of that.
which actually is part of a NESHKA's purview. Which a suspension prevention program is a program that we do at Stewart Middle School. So those are youth that we are at risk for going to the alternative school spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
So they've already have had multiple suspensions, and it's actually a class that's taught there at Stewart Middle School by one of our professionals who really emphasize on connections, and she's very trauma informed. We do a program called Active. What's the name of the curriculum we use?
Oh, positive action.
Positive action. I was completely wrong on it. Which it basically has lessons plans geared towards goal setting and problem solving and those kinds of things. Our trauma-informed care program, which Aneshka mentioned as well, that we serve. We've actually connected up with over 100 schools and organizations on the Treasure Coast.
Alcohol literacy challenge.
Alcohol literacy challenge, which helps educate middle school students. And now actually we have a high school component to that as well, to educate youth on how the media influences their decision-making so that they can be more critical about
Fake news? Oh,
well, it was more about alcohol.
Oh, sorry.
Specific to alcohol, but may want to infer.
translate to
You may
fake
want to
news.
infer that as well. But to be critical about the news that you hear, what's their purpose? What are they trying to do for you?
right.
Botfin life skills that's coming up for
That's
fifth grade.
A new one that part of the security issues that we had in our schools, the sheriff's department is no longer doing the DARE program.
Oh, they are.
So the school district reached out to us to replace that. So we're doing a program called Life Skills, which is a curriculum-based program to help youth develop life skills, and it's
Coping skills. What I love about it is that it's one of those curriculums that don't just talk about drugs, don't just talk about smoking or drinking. It basically equips the children with all the reasons why a lot of times children do engage in risk behaviors. So we're kind of expanding and hitting all types of issues.
And actually,
with
this
it.
program is done throughout the Treasure Coast and all the counties in the Treasure Coast except for Martin County. So we're just now bringing that to Martin County, and it's a pretty popular program because it does exactly what Aneshka does. It's kind of it's a universal prevention program.
Now, what age do you start with
I
them?
think so.
What age does that start?
That's
Fifth grade.
Fifth grade?
well, for this year it'll
Yeah.
be fifth grade, but our goal is to get it down to third grade. To
Third
start
grade,
in third
yeah.
grade, yes.
Because that's about where DARE started, wasn't it?
Yes.
DARE starts
Fifth-
at
it was a fifth grade curriculum. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know that's been a very successful program, and that's one of the things that it's interesting to hear that you guys are picking up on that because this is one of the things that I know a lot of us are concerned about is that with the focus on security, I think there's less focus on prevention, and which is ironic because supposedly we're trying to prevent, but that's not how. In my opinion, that's not how it's going to be prevented. It's going to be prevented because guys like you deal with it when they're in third grade or fourth grade and start correcting that behavior before they become the person that
Actually, there was a law that was passed the last legislative session that beefed up the security. It requires all schools now either to have school resource officers or to have professionals on staff that carry weapons. But also in that law did require all school districts to collaborate with a certified mental health agency. So the Martin County School District has collaborated with us. One of the new things that we are doing this school year is we now have a therapist in every school in the Martin County School District. So there's 22 schools there. Now we were in 13 already, so we had to expand into the 9 others. So that we're not completely there, but we will be there shortly, so that the youth can have access to that. Did not come with money because, of course,
No, it never comes
most
with
of those
money.
mandates never.
But you
do.
guys already make hundreds of thousands of dollars, so we don't need to pay you anymore.
But and so we're again, that's why our fundraisers are so important
Right.
to allow us to be able to do that. We do get some funding from the state as well as Children's Services Council to help us do that at a low cost. Our services range from $3. So if you were to go to a professional in the community, typically it's anywhere from $100 to $125 a session. Ours is based on family income and the size of the family. So most of our families that are solely on the sliding scale are from the $3 to $20 range. But one of the other nice things about our organization is, let's say you have insurance, but you have a $1,500 deductible. Well, as a private provider, you'd have to pay those $100, right? 15 sessions before you get to that. For us, you can still apply for the sliding scale. So to help you meet that deductible.
Okay.
So it's a way, access to care is very important. One. The other one is we know that people change the most when they're in crisis. So we try to have a shorter window of opportunity to get them in. No, I will say if you want a 4 o'clock on Tuesday, it may not be necessarily easy, if we're that specific.
Right.
But fortunately, in our history, we don't have a wait list. Again, sometimes you might have to take them out of school or do it late in the evening. But you can work towards those more flexible or important times for your family, but you would have to work towards that. So, because of course, people who are already getting sessions get the first dibs at that 5 o'clock session.
Right.
If you're coming in at 1 o'clock, so those are hard barriers. We have physical capacity, where we use every single one of our offices at our office at 4 o'clock, and so you can only add so many other people to be able to do that. That's why providing the services at the school site, I think, is really great as far as capacity for our community, for people who need it can access the care.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of, that's pretty, it's interesting that when you think about it, how many kids you're able to reach. I know you guys do in terms
I can
of.
tell you, we served 2,200 youth last year,
Wow.
provided over 30,000 sessions. I just
Wow.
got those numbers. That's how I know them.
And that's
Cool.
not including the prevention program,
That's not-
though.
right.
Which-
And those are counseling sessions.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, and as Aneshka said, in our prevention programming, we
it's over
Probably-
6,800 kids that we reach with prevention.
Yeah. Now, and you guys do a number of things. You do a fee for service, right? I mean, you generate.
Yes.
You generate revenue.
So we are a Medicaid provider. We can't bill
Yeah.
insurance, as I was mentioning, but
Yeah.
we do it at a lower cost, which
Right.
is why the support from the Community Children's Services, the state, and those things help us offset those costs.
Yeah, and it makes it tough because an organization your size, a lot of the things that you're doing are going to be are almost like an operating business. They're out there providing those services, fee for services, things like that. Sometimes the fundraising is hard because when you're focused like that, the fundraising portion of it is difficult. So that's why this fundraiser with the Festival of Trees is a big one for you guys, and it is important to support those because there are nowadays, especially in the business you're in, where you're doing fee for service type things on some of this stuff. The reimbursement rate isn't that great, and plus it typically doesn't cover overhead. It assumes that you're already taking care of your overhead.
Mhm.
Well, with that many students and that many sessions, not covering overhead, and like you said, your book's solid. Somebody's got to cover that overhead. So in general, that's coming through a lot of contributions and other things that
Yes.
have got to take place.
And all the activities that Aneshka does are all free of charge. They're to the community, just like the Mapping the Middle. It is a free to the community.
Right.
Our school suspension program, our life skills program, all of those things are free.
And
of charge.
you actually forgot two more,
Yeah.
our Lead and Seed and Moms for Mental Health. So those are two additional programs that we have.
And now, what are those? What kind of thing?
So Lead and Seed is we have a group of youngsters that are about middle school and high school. We had the Lead and Seed trainers come in, teach the kids how to assess, develop, and implement prevention programming. And then they kind of roll with it and identify what needs to be addressed. And I truly believe that that is true prevention because those kids know it. They're right in it. So they chose to address vaping, which ironically enough, if you look at the Florida Youth Substance Abuse Survey from 2016 to the Florida Youth Substance Abuse Survey in 2018, vaping is actually one of the main things that has gone up like 3 times in not just high school but also middle school. So they had their fingers right on the pulse of what one of the biggest issues is in at least our county.
Yeah.
So their program is addressing that, and now they're shifting into still addressing the same thing but addressing it perhaps another way. So I welcome also any middle schoolers or high schoolers that might be interested to give me a call and join, because it's a fun group, and we have volunteer supervisors from our Martin County Fire Rescue as well as Stewart PD, from Safe Space, and from the city of Stewart, all kind of coming together as supervisors to help guide these students and what they are wanting to do.
Just as and a question I had is in terms of, and I know you guys are, you guys are kind of like the front line. I mean, you're the infantry. We send you in
Yes.
first. You take all the shots,
Yes.
and then we. So I know you guys are probably already dealing with this or are going to be dealing. The big concern with the issue with the legalization of marijuana had to do with this age group. Really,
Yes.
is mentally they're not developed. It does affect mental development at this age.
Yes, it does.
And so, and I saw something the other day that there in some of the states where it's legal, they're smuggling it into the schools, elementary schools and middle schools, and candy and all kinds
that
of
has
stuff.
actually gone up considerably from 2016 to 2018 with the medical legalization of
Yeah.
marijuana, which we kind of anticipated as mental health professionals that usually does. The unfortunate thing is it does trickle down to the kids when you do legalize things like that.
Yeah. So, what kind of programs have you guys have you started dealing with that yet in a formal way? Is it a large enough problem yet, or is it are you just beginning to see some of the effects of it?
We don't have any programs specifically to marijuana use. As Aneshka has mentioned, a lot of our prevention programming is what we call universal prevention. So if we address the issues that would cause a kid to gravitate towards misuse of marijuana, and we have the same issue with alcohol. I mean, alcohol still by far is the most dominant drug that's used in in our adolescent population. What we've done very well at in this county is delay or youth are getting older and older before they have their first use. So we actually have, even as a state, have made a lot of headways with that as well. And really, I think we're fighting a losing battle with the marijuana. It's here. It's going to stay. The goal is to delay that use until they're adults, when their brains are fully developed. And that is the part that a lot of parents really struggle with, is that when they give their kids marijuana or they give their kids alcohol, which does happen, they forget that their kid is still developing, right? That their lungs are developing, their brains are developing. And so the impact on that is very different than it is for them.
Right.
They are not, they may look big like an adult, but they are not.
Yeah. And when it's legal, there's this thought that, well, it's legal, it's okay. It's safe. Yeah,
That's right.
It's safe.
And,
That's
and
right.
alcohol is horrible for you. I
Yeah.
mean, it is an absolutely horrible drug, but it is as legal as can be.
Well, and some of my friends that are in this industry, from sugar, just the whole concept of and alcohol.
Sugar is awful for you too,
right? And so and it's the same thing. But it's okay. Give them some, give them some candy, give them some this, and so I know it's a big deal. So it's kind of tough. But again, just mention that we have Rosalind Wiseman. She's coming Queens Bees and Masterminds Friday, October 26th from 6 to 7:30. And Creating a Culture of Dignity, Saturday, October 27th from 9:30 to 11. The Friday session is for parents and tweens. And then Saturday is primarily educators, parents, and professionals that work with the tweens and the youth. This will be a great program. She's a tremendous author, and you'll have an opportunity to figure it out and see what's going on. She's she's hitting all of the issues that your kids are dealing with right now. So, and we appreciate all the things you guys do. It's funny. One of the things that I always look at is you talked about it, but it's always interesting to see, what a person's like when their backs to the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And what you guys are doing is helping them deal with that. Mm-hmm. And that's so that they do become that person. And that's developed at this age, at elementary school, middle school. That's where you develop that internal thing that that you have to deal with that. But I appreciate all the things you guys do. I appreciate you guys coming in. Hopefully you guys learned something today and we got some information. I'm always excited about having our Community Solutions program and having the speakers come in. And we'll be back again next month right here on WSTU Digital 1450. We are Martin County's Heritage Station.